Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I thought I'd make this video for you to share some really important information, and that is about common mistakes that tend to get made in OET speaking. Unfortunately, these mistakes do lose valuable marks, and who wants to lose valuable marks when the exam is as important as this is? So, the good news is that although these mistakes are really common, some of these mistakes that I'm sharing with you can be fixed pretty quickly. It's just about knowing what they are. So, these tips that I've put together, these come from my years of experience teaching OET students, and I've taught hundreds over the years. So I've started to see patterns in the mistakes that are made, and I just want you to benefit from what I've noticed. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Joan. I'm a former UK doctor. I'm a premium OET preparation provider. What I do is guide my students who are preparing for OET so that they can succeed in the test. My next role is to help support and guide them and coach them as they get ready for those all important interviews. But anyway, that's enough about me for now. Today will be tip number one, and coming up over the next few days and weeks, we're going to share with you more and go deeper into the other tips that I have. There are 5 really common mistakes that I've noticed that lose candidates' marks. We're going to start today with looking at common mistake number 1. And that's starting the role play incorrectly. You do get scored, should I say, on how you initiate the conversation in the role play. To get that right, there are a few things to think about. What you need to be clear on is the setting, first of all. So you can imagine the setting and then think, how would I start this kind of conversation if this were real life? So be clear on the setting, first of all. The next thing to consider is to be clear on the purpose of the consultation. So, what is your role in the patient's care? Now, of course, this might also be the carer of a patient or the relative that you're talking about. But the point is, be clear on why you're having the conversation. What's the purpose? To be able to start the conversation properly, you are also going to need to be very clear on whether or not you know the patient already. So imagine it's a follow up appointment. You know the patient already. No need to introduce yourself again. You know each other. Okay, so it's important to figure that out. Now, the next point, which is something that's missed by so many candidates, is this one. And this is what I want to spend a little bit more time on in this short video. So you need to be really clear on whether or not the conversation is starting at the beginning or in the middle. So this sounds strange, right? Why would we start in the middle? OET want to see how flexible you are with your English, and by being able to see different role plays and different starts, you'll be able to demonstrate how flexible you are. So it's something to be aware of. Not all of them start at the beginning of a conversation, some start in the middle. So here's a tip for you. When you read the role play card, if you can see that you have just examined the patient, this is a wonderful clue for you. This is going to tell you, do not start by introducing yourself. Okay? You're in the middle of the conversation. So instead, you are going to imagine that you've already introduced yourself. You've done all your greetings. You've then examined the patient. And now you're continuing to talk. So hopefully that all makes sense. To illustrate the point, I just want to show you 2 different role plays, okay? The first one is going to be a speaking test for a doctor. So it's OET medicine speaking. And the second one is going to be OET nursing. Okay, so let's first of all have a look at a role play for doctors here. Having a look at this one, what I want you to focus on is this part of it, which is giving you the background information for the role play. If we read it through, we can see that it says, this 40-year-old patient broke their left leg, a complete closed tibia and fibula fracture. And this was 10 weeks ago. You have just examined the patient's leg and x-rays. Note the language here. You have just examined the patient's leg and x-rays, which show that the bones are healing well. Neurovascular status is intact and a callus has formed between the bones. Okay, so key language here to note is that you have just examined the patient's leg and x-rays in this case. So, do you need to introduce yourself in this one? What do you think? You're right. No, no introduction is required. You have to imagine that you already did this, okay? So no introduction required, no greetings required. You are just going to start from this point here. You're going to move on to task 1. An example of how you might start this might be, okay, Mrs. Smith, so now that I've examined your leg and had a look at your x-rays, I can see that everything is progressing really well, but I would like to ask a few more questions if that's okay. Then you're going to move on to task 1. So when I spoke there, did you notice I didn't ask the patient's name? I didn't introduce myself and give my name. I just got on with the conversation as if I was in the middle of it. Okay, so that's an example of what you can do here. Introducing yourself when it says you have just examined the patient's leg and x-rays would have been a mistake. So moving on then, this is an example for OET nursing. So let's take a look at it. It says, this 45-year-old patient recently had a blood test which indicated low iron levels. He or she has started taking a daily iron supplement. The doctor has asked you to speak to the patient about increasing his or her dietary iron. Okay, so in this case, you're the nurse and you're going to see a patient who is 45 years old who has low iron levels. The doctor has asked for you to speak with them. So your job is to first of all, find out what the patient understands about iron deficiency. I have a question for you. Does this role play need to start from the very beginning, or do you start the role play as if you're in the middle of the conversation? What do you think for this one? So hopefully, from the tips that I've given you, it's clear on this one that it sounds like you should be starting from the beginning, okay? There is no indication that you are in the middle of this conversation. So the best thing here would be to introduce yourself to your patient, to greet your patient. So note the two differences there. They may start at the very beginning, like a more conventional consultation, or you may have to imagine that you've already started the conversation and start in the middle for the role play, just like we did in this one here. So now I'm going to take you back to one final thing to think about as you initiate the conversation, okay? So this is the final thing I wanted to mention today before we wrap up, which is just this really common linguistic error that is so simple for you to fix, okay? So this is a good thing. Once you know this, you'll not make the mistake again. So let's remember the rule that when we use a title, for example, Miss, we're going to use a last name, okay? Title plus last name. So, for example, saying to your patient, oh, hello again, Miss Anna, would be incorrect. We need to use a surname, for example, Miss Anderson. So, title plus last name. Or the alternative would be simply to use the patient's first name, but the first name in isolation, no title required. All of these tips really relate to the assessment criteria. If you are not familiar with the assessment criteria, then I strongly advise you to go on to OET.com, have a look at the speaking test criteria. There you will see what's expected of you linguistically and what's expected of you from a clinical communication criteria point of view. So I've highlighted a few things on this document here, and this is actually an example of how I work with some of my students. So for example, we might do a role play and I'll notice that there are a few errors in different parts of it. So what I do is I highlight the criteria that's causing the problem and we talk about them. What we were talking about was this criteria A1, initiating the interaction appropriately. I hope that you've found that all helpful. If you do have any questions at all, then please feel free to write a little message in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. If you want to contact me directly, also, you're free to do so, and you'll be able to find out details of how to do so in the comments if you're on Facebook or in the show notes if you're watching this on YouTube. Well, it's been wonderful speaking with you. Hopefully that helps. That's all for today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Share with you more tips on how to avoid mistakes in OET speaking. Bye for now.